All right, everybody. So, welcome to this month's Learning Lab. Today, what we're going to be going over is setting up Wisys. So, for those of you that don't know me, I know Greg. I don't think Neil and I have met before, but I'm Chase Linson-Bigler. I always leave my camera on just to make the introduction, but I'm going to go ahead and turn that off so you can just focus on the content here. And what I do here at Wisys is I manage all of our partner enablement. So a big part of our partner program for 2023 is just trying to get some more content out there, specifically for training and teaching our partners, but stuff that our customers can use as well. And a big part of that has been doing these learning labs. So we've been doing these since the start of this year. We plan to do them every month on the second Tuesday of each month, 2:30 to 3:30 Eastern. So for anybody that wants to make sure they're available for these. I know, partners get busy and schedules can get booked up. We only send out the invite about a week in advance. So if you want to make sure you have that time on your schedule each month, it will be the second Tuesday every month, 2:30 to 3:30, if you want to make sure you have that time slot booked up. Yeah, but so what I do for our partners is I'm a dedicated resource. I do introduction training for new partners and new employees of our partners. I go into design tool training to teach those partners that have already had that introduction how to tailor and change our applications to fit customer processes and get the service dollars for that, of course, over time. And then I do a lot of standing team meetings for our partners as well for continued enablement, which that's important for things like what we're going over today. So learning labs supplement that a bit and give you all a chance to, regularly see things in Wisys, see what's changed, get refreshers on how to do things. But those standing team meetings can be really important too, because your team can take that time. They have a dedicated slot on my calendar to come in and ask any questions they're facing with Wisys at that point in time, which is good for that continued enablement because, if you're not doing certain things like the things we go over in the learning lab, if you're not doing them regularly, sometimes you lose that information and you forget how to do some of the functionality in Wisys, and those meetings are great for that. So if you need any of this, if you're not doing any of this right now, feel free and reach out and set something up. That's something very important that we're trying to tackle with all of our partners is at least get them that foundational training and get them started with the product, but then keeping those standing meetings so that we can continue to be in touch and keep working together as a team in the future. All right, so why are we here today? Let's get into it. So today we're going to cover everything related to Wisys setup essentially. So we're going to start with adding companies, basically, taking your companies and databases from SAP and adding them into the Wisys system. Then we're going to discuss adding users. We're going to set up an indirect user today. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. Then we will create roles, which that's kind of the key of today's session. So roles is essentially how we control the security within Wisys, right? That's where we can decide what a specific user can and can't do, what a specific user has access to, those types of things. And I'll show you how to set up a user with that role. And lastly, we're going to go over just a couple of general agility settings. Throughout the course of this year, there's going to be several learning labs that touch on different settings in the agility system, but there are some settings that don't really fit into any other type of learning lab, so to speak, right? Those settings are the real basic things, but the really important things to understand for getting started with the product. So today, made a lot of sense, and it's an ideal time to cover some of those, getting started type of things. All right. And I expect today to be a little bit of a quicker session here. So, of course, if we have a lot of time left, we'll have plenty of time for questions, but we might get out of here a little bit early. All right. So first, I opened up SAP here. We're going to go through setting up a company and setting up a user. So first things first, in my system here, I have two companies set up in SAP Business One. I have my Gen demo, which is what we're on right now. That's what I already have set up in my system, and that's where I'm going to be doing the administering of these licenses and users and different things. And we're going to set up a new company, our SBO Demo US. We're also going to set up a user in here. This is going to be Chase. That's a user I set up for myself. It's a brand new user with an indirect license. That's what you guys are going to experience most commonly is going to be indirect users and limited logistics users. Typically a employee in the warehouse is going to have something like an indirect license, and they're going to just either be scanning or maybe potentially utilizing some Agility Explorer or something of that nature. All right, so now I'm going to jump over to Agility Explorer. We're going to start by setting up that company that we talked about, that SBO Demo US. So I'm in here. First, you can see down here, there's only one company set up. It's my Wisys demo, my Gen demo. I'm going to go up to File, Options, and I'm going to go to Security. And now we're going to go into Companies. And you can see here, I just have that Gen demo company. When we hit Add, what it's going to do is it's going to give us a list of all the companies we have available from SAP Business One. Now, it's important to note here that this will only give the companies that the Wisys updater has been run against, right? So you have the option to not run the Wisys updater for certain companies in B1. It's a good rule of thumb if you absolutely don't ever want a certain company and a customer to be set up for Wisys, just to not run the updater against them, because anybody who has an administrator license for Wisys, so let's say you want your warehouse manager to be able to go in here, add users, make changes to roles. If you're concerned about them having the ability to add a company, it's best to make sure that company is not on the list, because if they have the ability, they could go in here, look at the list, and accidentally add a company that was never intended to use Wisys. So here I ran the updater. I have just Gen demo, which is already set up in SBO Demo US. I'm going to go ahead and select that to set up that company. Now, the only other thing that we can really do in here that is an important thing to note is we can color code to add some visual cues to our companies. So let's say this is a case where my Gen demo is my live database and my SBO Demo US is a test database. I want to have some visual cues there so that the employees of my customer know that whenever they're jumping into the system, which system that they're in, so they get that visual cue before they start messing around with the data in there. So I'm going to go ahead and make this SBO Demo US a green. We'll just do this lime green there to give them that cue. Okay, green means go. I'm safe in here. This is the test database. And then I'm going to give a red to my Gen demo, because right now we're in a testing phase. We're just getting set up. I want to give that red there so they know when that red is shown, stop, take a look. I'm in the live database and I need to be careful with what I do in here. So I'm going to hit OK. Now, when we go back, nothing has changed. We don't even see our new company there. So if we go ahead and close out of Agility Explorer, and then go ahead and reopen Agility Explorer, the first thing you're going to see is that visual cue. It's going to catch your attention there for our Gen demo database once this loads up here. So now you see the visual cue. You got a red bar at the top, and our database name is displayed there with a red fill around it as well. Again, that gives them that flag. Okay, hold on a second. It's red. I'm in live. I need to switch over to test. If they need to do so, they can go ahead and switch over to test. Now, in this case, we don't see test here because I actually forgot to add it to the manager. So that's an important thing to note. We have to go to the users in security and give them access to the database as well. So even though I have two companies set up in here, doesn't mean that just because manager is an administrative Wisys super user, so to speak, it doesn't mean that he just gets access to everything. So I'm going to go in here to my users, company access, and then on manager, I'm just going to assign him SBO Demo US, which is our test database, and hit OK. And now I can repeat the process. See, nothing's updated here yet. We'll go ahead and open it one more time here. And now he'll have access to that test database there once this loads in. So now I can go ahead and select my test, and we'll see it'll have that green visual cue that's going to tell the user, okay, I'm safe in here. I can do what I need to do. Now that's something that a lot of people don't think about, but when you're consulting for your customers, especially in the testing phase, this really comes in handy, right? When you have that visual cue there, it allows them to, especially with the red, whenever they're in the live database, they see it, they it catches their attention and they realize, okay, I need to be careful in here because, this is the database where I can mess things up. This is live. I need to take care of this. So those visual cues will be something important going forward. And, you'll now see that every time I'm in and out of my Agility Explorer here. So I'm going to stick to Gen Demo for right now. I'm going to go back up to my file. Now we're going to go ahead and make that user for Chase. So companies are set up. My admin user, my manager, he has access to both companies. Everything's ready. Now, let's say we're getting ready to bring some things over to live. We're going to add a live user. That's going to be Chase, and he's only going to have access to Gen Demo. He's not going to touch SBO Demo US. So here, I'm just going to go down to New, and I'm going to go ahead and look up all the users in the SAP system by clicking that magnifying glass there. I can see everybody here in my system. I'm just going to go ahead and select Chase. When we click in another field, we'll see his name will populate from SAP as well. But let's say in this case that, maybe we hired another Chase, and I need to put the last name, the initial for the last name of Chase in here so that I know who's who. I'm just going to go ahead and add a Chase L. And if he was an Active Directory user, I would be able to assign that here. Now, in my environment, there's only one Active Directory user, and it is the manager. So you see nothing displayed here. If the manager wasn't set up yet, their user would be in our list here that could be assigned, but it's already assigned. There's no Active Directories left. Chase is not an Active Directory user. So we're just going to go ahead and close out of that and leave Active Directory blank. Now, I'm going to set Chase up to be an Explorer user and an Agility Mobile user. He's going to have access to both the desktop and the handheld. I'm going to go ahead and enter in his SAP password. I'm going to make the passwords match. And his SAP password is just simple 12345. And lastly, I have the ability to do his security level here. So what you see here is user and administrator for security level, right? There really are 4 security levels in Wisys. If I wasn't an administrator, if I was a Wisys developer or a developer, I would have the ability to make other people that. That is what you would usually want for your team, somebody who's going to be in here doing tailored applications for the customer. You would want to give them, a developer Wisys security level. Then administrator, of course, is a super user in the system, someone who's going to have free reign to add users, change roles, things like that, but still not somebody that you want to have the security clearance to change just any product they want with the design tools. An administrator can still do things in design tools, but they're not going to have the full access to change things that, like a Wisys developer made and things like that. But for this example, again, Chase is an indirect user. He's just going to be using the handheld for the most part with a couple grids on the desktop. So we're just going to set him up as a user here. And we would have the ability to add a picture if we wanted to as well. Now I'm just going to hit OK. Now that user is created. We see Chase here in the system. And we can go over here and assign him company access. So again, I'm just giving him access to Gen Demo here. And I'm going to hit OK. And now he's set up. But what we're going to see in Wisys is if we come down here where it says our database, we're in the right database that he has access to. If I double click on manager, I'm going to be able to select Chase and open up Chase's account on Agility Explorer. But we'll see that everything is blank. The reason for this is we didn't assign any roles yet. So when I talked about how roles play into security and are important for the security within Wisys, by default, somebody has no security, no access to go in and do anything until they're given access, right? Unless I'm an administrative user, an administrator automatically has access to everything on the desktop, nothing on the handheld, but everything on the desktop. Every other user, they have access to nothing until they're granted access by that administrator that we're talking about, right? So Chase currently has access to nothing in the system. So we might as well switch back to manager here. And we can also take a look on the handheld just so you can see what that would look like. So we can see that our user is created because we'll get a successful login here. But what we'll see is, again, it's going to be completely blank once he logs into the handheld. Nothing will be there because we didn't give him the correct security credentials to actually do anything on the handheld application. We'll just give this a second to load here. I haven't played with this in a few hours, so it's a little slow right now. But yep, see here, everything's blank. Even our menus are blank. So if you're familiar with the Agility 360 application, this would be a drop-down list of distribution, pallets, and production, where you could select certain forms. He has no access to anything, so he's not granted any menus. Just simply nothing is here on the handheld for him right now. So now we can go ahead and log him out. He's not ready yet. Now we're going to jump in and go ahead and give him roles. So if I go back up to my security here and I click on roles, now we can go ahead and start assigning things to Chase, give him access to do things in the Wisys system. So first, we're going to start in the Agility Explorer section. These are going to be the roles for the desktop. Like I mentioned, if I click down through these are the users that are allowed to access that role. On the right side here, you'll notice they're all blank. No users have any access. But if you remember, when I'm in there as the manager role, I have access to a bunch of grids. Again, just to reiterate, that's because if you're an administrator in the Wisys system, you automatically are granted access to everything on the desktop. An administrator needs to have that ability to do things on the desktop in Wisys, so they automatically get that administrator access, which is all desktop applications, but no mobile applications. So now I want to get Chase set up. Chase is an administrator. He had nothing on his desktop. So let's go ahead and get him something. So let's say we want to give him most applications, but we want to exclude a few things. One way to do that is to copy from an existing role. So we'll go down here to new role. And I'm just going to call this Learning Lab. Oh. All right. I'm going to keep Agility Explorer because, again, that identifies that it is a desktop role, not a mobile role, not a handheld device role, just desktop stuff. And I'm going to copy from that administrator role there because, like I said before, I want to give Chase access to most things. I'm just going to take a few things away. So an easier way to do that is to copy from the admin role, which will give him access to a bunch of applications, and then we can go ahead and remove from the list instead of adding a bunch of things from scratch. So before we want to give Chase access, let's say we want to remove the things we don't want him to touch. I'm going to go ahead and collapse everything there. And Chase is on the outbound side. He fulfills sales orders, helps ship things out of the warehouse, doesn't do anything inbound. So we want to take away his ability to see purchasing related grids. So I'm just going to go ahead and uncheck everything in here. You can see them drop off of my list there. And then I also don't want him to have access to anything production related. So I'll go ahead and uncheck my production grid there. There's nothing in MRP. Services is not checked. So there we go. Everything's unchecked there. Cleaned it up. So he takes the original role. We get rid of the purchasing and production related things, and we just give him access to inventory and outbound related grids on the desktop here. And lastly, we need to go ahead and add a member. So I'm just going to go ahead and click the plus sign, check Chase, add them there, and hit OK. Now when we go back to Agility Explorer here and double click and switch to Chase, we'll see he now has some menus here. So the user's been changed to Chase. We did give him the business partner grid still there. If he's only doing outbound stuff, maybe I should have took that off. But he has access to several different grids here from within sales orders, several different grids in Agility, inventory stuff, and that's what's going to fit his actual role in the warehouse there. So that's a pretty simple way to assign a role by copying, but let's say we want Chase to have access to a lot less stuff. Also, notice I went in as Chase, still I didn't switch back to manager. So this is a good example of the administrator user security and what the difference is here, right? The administrator, which is manager, when you go in here, they have all these options. They can go and do actual setup for the warehouse system. They can do security setup, create users, create rules, companies, whatever. But the regular user, which is Chase, who I'm in here as, has nothing in this menu, has no access to do anything because they're not an administrator. So I need to go back, go ahead and switch to manager here once again. All right, so now I'm back in his manager. We're gonna go ahead and change Chase's role. So now let's say that we feel like, we gave Chase access to too many things, right? We're gonna take him off of this role. So first off, we know he's only on this role, and we could remove him simply by hitting this. This will just remove him from the Learning Lab role. Then he has no role, right? But let's say we weren't sure he's on, we weren't sure if he's on another role or something like that, and we know we want him to be on none. We can also hit this button over here to remove him from every role. So to be safe here, I'm just going to go ahead and do that. And now I'm going to remove Chase L from all roles, and he has nothing in the system. But we know this Learning Lab role, we don't want anybody to have access to it anyway anymore. It's obsolete now, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that from the system as well. Just going to go down here and hit my delete role button. And now I want to create a new role, but this time instead of copying, I want to create it from scratch, specifically for Chase and what he needs to do. I don't want him to have access to a lot of things. So I'm going to go ahead and select new role, and we'll call it Learning Lab 2. Keep Agility Explorer for the desktop, but here I'm going to maintain no copy instead of selecting something like admin as I did before. And I'll hit OK. And now all we'll see here is we have just the header information there for Learning Lab 2. There's no drop down because there are no components assigned. So now in this case, before, I didn't want to give Chase the ability to access the role until I knew it only had the things that I wanted him to see. But in this case, nothing's here yet, and I'm going to turn them on as I want him to see them. So I'll just go ahead and give him access now. It won't hurt anything. So now he has access to the role, but it would still show nothing currently. I'll go ahead and collapse all of my different modules here. And now I'm going to go ahead and select the various grids and desktop applications that I want him to have access to. So I'm mostly going to focus on the sales side because he's an employee who deals with outbound stuff only. So I'm going to go in here and we'll give him sales orders, sales quotes, returns and returns requests, all that stuff so that he can, plan accordingly for his sales orders, SO deliveries so that he can see the sales orders that have been delivered. Again, just kind of focusing on making sure he knows what's going on with all the sales orders that are coming in and out of the warehouse. And lastly, we'll give him sales orders to pack so he knows what's ready to be packed in the warehouse there. I'll hit OK. And now when we go back, if we switch to Chase here, we'll see that he only has access once again to the sales order menu. So he had inventory and business partners before. Those are now gone. He only has access to sales here and just those specific, 6 grids that I gave him access to. So again, really easy to set up these roles and change the securities and access that certain users have. What we did here with Chase, originally we gave him a role similar to an administrator and gave him the access to a bunch of things. Then we decided, okay, maybe Chase is going in there and doing things he's not supposed to do. We want to cut down on his access. So we got rid of the role, removed him from the role, and go ahead and, make him his own specific role that's going to be heavily focused just on sales orders and, what's coming out of the warehouse essentially. Now Chase is set up, ready to go. He can use Agility Explorer. If I wanted to select something in here, I can go ahead and pull up a grid from Agility Explorer and start working and doing my job, right? But Chase is not prepared to use the handheld yet. There's nothing set up in the handheld, so if we log back in, it would still be blank. So we need to go ahead and get him set up there. So now it's going to go ahead and close my screen. I'm going to change over to Manager. And I'm going to jump back in here and go ahead and set Chase up for handheld access. So we'll jump back down to roles, but this time we need to make sure we switch to Agility Mobile. And now I'm going to highlight some things about the difference here for licensing with Agility Mobile, right? So let's say in Essentials, that's what has typically what we need. That would be similar to your admin, right? On the desktop. Well, nobody's assigned to it, but that doesn't mean that the administrator gets access. Like I mentioned before, the administrator has access to nothing automatically on the handheld as compared to, on the desktop, they have access to everything. So in this case, if we go down to Wisys demo, you see that the administrator manager is set up for Wisys demo. They're not set up for anything else in here, just Wisys demo, but they do have a role assigned to them in this case. So one way that I could, handle Chase and give him access is I could simply say, okay, Chase is a super user in the warehouse. Even though he's not set up as an administrator, I want him to have access to everything. I could simply, pick my manager, who actually has the same name as me, Chase Linsenbigler, type the full way out. I could have my manager selected here. I could say I'm copying his access and I'm giving it to Chase L. I want them to be able to use the same things. I could do that and hit OK here. And now Chase L will be set up with that Wisys demo license. And if we took a look at our handheld here, we'll see him have access to every menu, a bunch of different things, and he'll be all set up and ready to go. Really simple there. Now we see he has access to a million things. He has access to all three menus. Before he had absolutely nothing. Now he's set up and he can use the handheld. But like we mentioned, he only does outbound stuff. We don't need him to have all that. So we don't want to copy that. We want to backtrack there and remove some of the access that we gave him. So I'll come in here back to Agility Mobile, and I'll simply go back in here to Wisys demo. And I know Chase is only set up here, so I'm just going to go ahead and remove him. And now I'm going to create a new role. Once again, I'm not going to copy. We're going to call it outbound, because on the handheld, he just does the outbound process. And I'm going to switch to Agility Mobile. Again, it's important to note the difference there, right? Agility Mobile is handheld applications, forms, that type of stuff only, where Agility Explorer would be desktop applications. All right, and I am not going to copy, but once again, I'd have the access to copy what I need to. I hit OK. Now I can select my outbound here, and I can go ahead and give a bunch of applications to Chase on his outbound processes. So I'm going to start with some views. He needs to see some information, be able to do simple transactions like bin transfers. So we're just going to give him some stuff like that. Now, of course, if he's on the outbound side of the process, I want him to be able to do SO deliveries. And I'm also going to give him the ability to pack cartons and do some things with pallets as well, because on occasion, this company uses packages. So we gave him pack pallets there, or pack cartons there. Now I'm going to give him pack pallets, pallet view, pallet transfer, pallet letdown. I could assign him things all day. You get the gist. But now I've given him things that fit his role, right, on the outbound side of the warehouse. Everything I've given him fits his specific role. Now the role is ready and created to match what he actually does, in his everyday process in the warehouse there. So now if I hit OK, actually, one more thing. If we catch, I set all that up, but I did not give Chase access to the role. So once again, I can set up roles all day. Doesn't mean anybody can see them unless I assign them to a user. So here I'm going to go ahead and give it to just our new Chase user. Our manager, our admin user has access to a lot more things, so they're not necessary there. Hit OK. And now when we log in as Chase, we'll see some different applications and a little less freedom there, right? The security locked him down a little bit more. He only has access to so many applications now in this case. And he only has access to 2 menus. I didn't add anything production. We don't want him to do production. So now he can just see distribution or pallets. he has no access to anything production related. So pretty simple there. That's how you add users, add roles, add companies, and then assign those roles to the companies or to the users in those companies, right? So we talked about how to set up the company, how to set up the user, how to assign the role, and that gives you everything you need as a starting point, right, to get users set up in the Wisys system. But that all said, I did want to talk about a few small WMS settings that sometimes can be overlooked or misconstrued, right? That don't really fit in anywhere else except for the setup stage. So now that you know how to set up users, get everything started, and get people on their feet using the product, let's make sure it actually fits what they want to do, on the Wisys handheld. So we're going to jump into our WMS settings here. And we're just going to go over Agility Essentials options. There's a lot of other settings in here that I would honestly just say aren't necessarily worth showing on a learning lab. They're easier just to talk about and then, of course, discuss with the customer and get their answer on what they want to do. But these settings in Agility Essentials are very crucial to how the system functions. So we want to just discuss these a little bit here because they do play heavily into the setup. And these are going to be important for making sure once the users are up and running that they're able to do transactions the way that they, of course, intend to, right? So first, we're going to go through our single transaction forms and talk a little bit about that. So what a single transaction form is a form that produces a transaction for every line, essentially, right? So these boxes are all unchecked right now, which means they would operate as a preload and post form. So what I mean by that, if we go to SO delivery here, we'll see that you have the ability to post and view here, right? So as I go through a sales order on the SO delivery, I go item by item, right? I pick my sales order, then I select the item, I put in the quantity, and then I know, okay, I'm going to ship that much of that item. The way it works right now without single transaction turned on is it would save that to a preload table. And I could use this view button to look in the preload and see how many lines are there. But the preload gives me that ability to go through line by line and add all of those lines to a preload table and then push through one mass delivery note in the SAP system with every line on it, right? If I turn this off and turn to single transaction, every line I do is a transaction in its own. So what would happen is if I had a sales order with 10 lines, every time I go through, I'd go through all 10 times, do all 10 items for that sales order. It would create a delivery note in SAP every single time for every single line. So that sales order in SAP would have 10 delivery notes associated with it, right? And just so you can visualize how this change would look on the handheld, if I go here and just check delivery note as a single transaction and hit OK, and I pull back up my handheld and I go ahead and log out and log back in real quick. See, now that we're using it, it's going a lot quicker on us here. Now, if I jump into SO delivery, what you'll see is it starts to load in with those buttons, but then they get hidden. That's because the logic of the form looks immediately at, okay, is that box checked? Once it sees that that box is checked in the settings in the system, it goes ahead and it hides those. But that's really important because, your customers should be able to easily identify either, yes, we want this to be single transaction only, or we want the ability to save them to a preload and do a mass posting essentially, right? And we want to make sure those settings are taken care of and adjusted in the system before they're ever implemented and ready to go. So that's why that plays into the setup, because we want these to be functioning correctly from the get-go before they ever use Wisys. And that applies to everything on the list here. So goods received, PO, and delivery note are two obvious ones. Typically, there's going to be a lot of lines on sales orders and purchase orders. We want the ability to go through line by line without creating a new document in SAP for each and every single individual line. Same thing for production. On the production side, we have the ability to do single transaction for production issue, production return, and production receipt as well. Then over in general, this is very important for our serial and batch tracked customers. So this gives you a little bit more flexibility with how we track serial and batch data. in the Wisys system, right? We expand a little bit on what SAP is capable of doing, and we bring some more options to the handheld scanner here. So first, before we talk about those, I'm going to go ahead in my role, and I'm just going to turn on goods receipt PO so we can take a look at what this is going to actually look like. So even though that doesn't fit the outbound process, we're going to go ahead and give Chase access to that here. All right, goods receipt PO. I think that's it. No, that's not it. Goods receipt PO right there. All right. Now, if I open back up my WMS settings, I'm going to turn all these on. Or actually, first, let's look at it before I turn them on. So when they're off, what this means is if I have a batch tracked item or a serialized item, there will be no field for me to enter in a manufacturer's serial if it's serialized, or a manufacturer's batch if it's batch tracked. Also for batch tracked items, I won't have the ability to put in an expiration date right now. We can take a look at our handheld here and see that. I'm gonna have to log back out and back in real quick. This also showcases for you guys too how real time this really is, right? In a matter of seconds, I log out, log back in, and that change has already taken place. And it gives them the ability to pivot quickly, right? You could give somebody access to something, let them jump in there and do, just one thing. Maybe you don't want an employee to be able to do a goods receipt, but they just found an item. All right, I'm going to run and give you access to that real quick. They do the goods receipt, and then you take it right back away. You can do things like that in real time on here. Now, when we see here, I have a purchase order 853 with a batch tracked item on it. And remember, none of these boxes are checked. So when I pull up my batch tracked item here, you don't see access to any expiration date or manufacturer's batch, right? Pretty simple. That's probably what most of you are used to seeing on the handheld. Now, if I go ahead and turn them on, I'm not going to worry about serial because I don't have a serialized item. And hit OK. I'm just going to open that back up too so we can keep track. Now, when I log back in, we'll see those fields exposed for that specific item, which again gives those types of customers who need that ability to track expiration date and manufacturer's batches or serials. It gives them the ability to track that here in the Wisys system. So we go to 853. Let me grab my item here. And now this time you see those fields were not hidden. They stayed on the screen because again, the form starts up by looking at the logic defined in our settings there. It sees that we want to track a manufacturer's batch, and it sees that we want to define an expiration date from the manufacturer as well. And now we have those two extra fields and the ability to do so. So again, I wanted to show what these Agility Essentials options do because it ties very heavily into the setup process. I'd consider it a big part of setup. We want to make sure these applications are giving the customer access to what they need to access, from Wisys from the get-go here as soon as they're set up. All right. So that's everything I wanted to show you today. Like I said, I figured it would be a little bit of a quicker session, still about 40 minutes, but that's good. Leaves us some time for questions if we have any questions too here at the end. So just to walk back through what we covered though, we talked about adding companies. Now you can add every company that the customer has access to in SAP. They can all be added in Wisys, but they need to run the updater against those companies for them to show up on the list. So if a company is missing, just to reiterate, remember, when that company is not on the list, the updater has probably not been ran against it. We also have the ability to color code those companies too to stop a user and give them a visual cue. Hey, this is red. Maybe I shouldn't be in here playing around. That type of thing, right? Then we can add users.
You there?
Yeah, I'm here. Hello?
Okay, we lost you for a bit, but that might have been me.
Oh, yeah. Okay, where'd you lose me at? Aaron?
You were just talking about what we covered, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think I might be losing you actually. I don't know, but hopefully everybody can hear me. So just to reiterate though, we talked about companies, the ability to color code, the fact that some companies may be missing if the updater wasn't ran against them. We discussed adding users. So with the adding users, of course, there you have different security levels, and we talked a bit about what an administrator has the ability to do, what's automatically given to them as far as access, compared to what a regular user would have. Then we discussed creating roles, how you give access for certain users to different applications on the handheld and desktop, and the ability to copy from pre-existing roles there. Then we talked about assigning users to those roles. Who do we want to give access to the things in each role? And lastly, we discussed those general agility settings, which were pretty simple, talking about how to make forms single transaction, as well as the ability to turn on some additional batch and serial tracking data. So that's all for today. Again, shorter session, but something important. Setup is very important. If you guys have any additional questions, you can always reach out to me outside of this webinar too. Shoot me an email and let me know your questions. And like I referenced at the beginning as well, we want to make sure we're doing enablement for every partner. That's a big goal of mine. So if we're not talking, feel free to reach out. Let's start a conversation and figure out how I can better help your team. If you want to get something standing set up, or actual introduction training or design tool training, let me know about that as well. I want to get you guys the right resources and get you to where you want to be, because Wisys is a big services product. There's a lot you can do with the product, and to get there, we want to get you enabled. So that's a big goal of mine. All right, Aaron, do we have any questions in the chat?
Yeah, one of the questions was about licensing. You didn't, and I'm pretty sure I could answer this, but you might want to. Do additional additional licenses required when switching between companies? So do you have to have licenses for each company, or can you mix and match Wisys licensing between companies and databases within SAP?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to go ahead and answer that, Aaron, go ahead, because that
Yeah.
plays heavily into your side of things on the
No,
front side.
that's exactly true. So, a benefit of Wisys is you could have multiple databases and multiple companies within a single instance of SAP Business One. So if you have 3 or 4 different companies, you can take some of your licenses from one company and use them in a different company, as long as they are in the same server instance of SAP Business One. So that is a benefit, that you won't have to buy double the amount of licenses for each one of your companies. You can mix and match and move those with users, like Chase showed you today with the setup. You can assign those different companies with the same license. So some of my customers that we've acquired, they'll have multiple companies, different companies within their same umbrella of companies, and they can assign users to each one of those companies within SAP and Wisys. So that's something that you can't do with some of the other products out there. You can buy 10 licenses and divide them up as many ways as you want within your companies under a single instance of SAP. Great. I think that's really about all the questions. I answered a few offline, but it was a great showing today, Chase. I learned some things as well, so always good.
Yeah, definitely. That's what I mean. It's a quicker thing going through the setup, but it's important. And I hope you guys all got something out of this. Of course, you get a recording too. So if you need to go in there and set up some users, this will give you the 101 on how to do everything you need to know in there. But yeah,
I think it's a very good overview. I mean, I think this is what a lot of the questions that I get and support gets right away from partners, is about adding users and assigning roles and rules to those users. And you showed a very nice, clean, and easy way how that works. So yeah, everybody save this video. When you receive it, you'll want to refer to that later at some point. It'll also be on our YouTube channel, as most of these learning labs are all going to be put on our YouTube channel too. So thank you. Thanks, Chase.
all right. Yeah, thank you guys. Thanks for attending, and hopefully we'll see you next month at our next Learning Lab.